www.offthecorner.net. You're watching the F.A.C.T Project. And F.A.C.T, of course, is an acronym that stands for Fundamental African-Centered Thought. The goal here on the F.A.C.T Project is to convey some thoughts and some information to members of our community. I'm having an issue where I'm not seeing myself. So just put a 1 in the chat if I can be heard, because I'm not seeing myself for some reason. But we're going to go ahead and forge ahead anyway. Today is Inauguration Day for some people. For many of us, it's Dr. Martin Luther King Day. So we are acknowledging the life and the legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King. In the last half hour, we are slated to have join us the great Dr. James McIntosh of CMOTAP, which is the Committee to Eliminate Media Offensive to African People, and Brother Kwabena Rasuli of the Clear the Airways Project. They have an update for us with respect to the Netflix boycott, which began a little bit more than a year, or not quite a year yet, just a little less than a year ago. They had a meeting yesterday, and so they're going to update us with respect to what happened in that meeting. I today want to talk a little bit about the great Dr. Martin Luther King, whose life and legacy and his efforts I don't think I have to repeat here. But I think some of his thinking, some of his ideas are not clearly conveyed when January comes around and we acknowledge the great Dr. Martin Luther King. Of course, every January, Dr. King is reduced to someone who gave a speech called "I Had a Dream," as if the great Dr. Martin Luther King only said, "I have a dream." So his whole life and his whole legacy is limited to this one speech and one sentence that he said in the speech. That doesn't sum up who the great Dr. Martin Luther King was by any stretch. So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that we cannot let people that don't look like us tell our story and craft our narrative, because if they do, then it becomes watered down. And they will limit someone like a Dr. King to someone that was just a passive dreamer. I say Dr. King was more revolutionary than he was a passive dreamer. And so the "I Have a Dream" speech was August of 1963. And I'm just putting this in context. The Martin Luther King of 1968 was a lot different from the Martin Luther King of 1963 that said, "I have a dream." The 1968 Martin Luther King was more revolutionary. He was more about, he was going more towards economics as opposed to integration. And I think when the story is told, they limit Dr. King to just being someone who was an integrationist. But of course, he was definitely a lot more than that. Dr. King talked about reparations, which I think is interesting. You know, we have a reparations movement now that's being led by some of these Black separatist groups that are dividing the group in the name of trying to ask for reparations. Martin Luther King was talking about reparations as far back as 1967. And Martin Luther King might have been talking about reparations even before that. He talked about the importance of acknowledging your identity and having an agreeable perspective of yourself and a good self-image. I think that's something Black people still struggle with now, poor self-image. He talked a lot about economics. And I think the idea that undergirds the narrative of Dr. King when his birthday comes around is this idea of integration. Dr. King was not just an integrationist, although he was that. He began to turn the corner at some point and go away from integration and more towards economics and group economics, and went so far as to talk about boycotts. The great Dr. Martin Luther King was known for marching, but he said, and this is something people always overlook, he said if your march is not anchored to economic withdrawal, then you basically all you did was march. So he's saying your marching and your public demonstration has to be linked to economic withdrawal. I think that's interesting because that's something we don't talk about when we talk about the great Dr. Martin Luther King. I have here some audio. It should be video, but I'm not seeing myself, so I want everybody to stay with me. I have with me some audio of the great Dr. Martin Luther King saying things that are a lot different from the Martin Luther King that they tell us about. This Martin Luther King sounds, this Martin Luther King to me sounds a lot more like Malcolm X than the Martin Luther King that they give us every time the holiday comes around. This Martin Luther King was talking about the importance of acknowledging your identity as a Black person. And so in the chat, give me a 1 if you can hear me, because I'm not seeing myself, so I'm kind of just winging it here. But this is civil rights. Great Dr. Martin Luther King telling us that Black is beautiful. This is not I Have a Dream speech.
I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. As I said to a group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Kennedonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation.
So he's saying if Black people are to be free, we basically have to free ourselves and do for ourselves.
Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of.
Be proud of our heritage. This is not the passive I have a dream, Martin Luther King.
Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean.
Now, that sounds more like Malcolm X than Martin Luther King. Keep listening.
But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm Black, I'm proud of it, I'm Black and beautiful.
I am Black and beautiful. That's not I Have a Dream. It's the great Dr. Martin Luther King giving us a positive sense of self-identity. That's part of the Martin Luther King that you don't get when all they can talk about is this concept of I have a dream. Now, I Have a Dream again was 1963. That was early Dr. Martin Luther King. I Have a Dream actually was 8 years after the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. This is where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger. Now, to put the Black movement in America in context, you have to understand that there were two movements of Black people in America. You have the integration movement and the independence movement. That was it. The integration movement was people like Urban League, NAACP, Civil Rights Movement. These were people who were telling us that freedom for Black people meant integrating with our oppressor. Now that's backwards. I don't agree with that, but this is what the first movement was, the integration movement. No talk of eliminating the system that continues to oppress us to this day. Second movement among Black people in America was the independence movement. These are people like Martin Delany, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X. They were saying we need to create an independent reality for ourselves instead of being hyper-focused on integration and integrating with our enemy. And so the Martin Luther King of 1968 was slowly turning the corner and beginning to go more towards independence as opposed to integration. However, now when the story is told, not only is Martin Luther King referred to or spoken of as if he was just a passive dreamer, but they make him someone who is just an integrationist, assimilationist. They don't talk about the Black is Beautiful speech. They don't talk about the What is Your Life's Blueprint speech. I'm going to go to that now. I think this is interesting because I discovered this maybe a year ago. And I think it's interesting that no one ever references this speech or talks about it. And if they play it, this is interesting. If they play it, they edit out this portion that I'm about to play for you now. And if you hear it, once you hear it, you'll realize why this portion of the speech is being edited out. This is a Martin Luther King that sounds more like Malcolm X than Martin Luther King that we've been given.
Some of the things that should be in your life's blueprint. Number one in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebodyness. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you are nobody. Always feel that you count. Always feel that you have worth. And always feel that your life has ultimate significance. Now that means that you should not be ashamed of your color.
Do not be ashamed of your color.
You know, it's very unfortunate that in so many instances, our society has placed a stigma on the Negro's color. And you know, there are some Negroes who are ashamed of themselves. But don't be ashamed of your color. Don't be ashamed of your biological features, somehow you must be able to say in your own lives and really believe it, I am black but beautiful.
I am black but beautiful. Listen.
And believe it in your heart. And therefore, you need not be lured into purchasing cosmetics advertised to make you lighter.
Uh-oh.
Neither do you need to process your hair to make it appear straight. I have good hair, and it is as good as anybody else's hair in the world. And we've got to believe that.
Okay, so here is the great honorable Martin Luther King telling us not to bleach our skin and not to straighten our hair. Now, I'm not trying to take aim at anybody, but how many black women straighten their hair? They seem to have missed that message coming from the great Martin Luther King. Again, this is no I Have a Dream speech. These clips that I'm playing for you are from different speeches. This is a Martin Luther King that sounds a lot more like Malcolm X. Now, this is not necessarily a narrative of integration. He's going more towards what I mentioned earlier about this idea of independence and creating an independent reality for ourselves. Not only that, he even at some point talks about the idea that the dream that he had when he talked about the I Have a Dream speech. He said the dream has basically become a nightmare. And later on in the 1968, Martin Luther King had abandoned this idea of the dream when he said that the dream had become a nightmare. Now, the dream was this idea of integration and fair and equal treatment for everyone, so forth and so on. We all know the I Have a Dream speech, or at least that little excerpt, because they normally don't play the whole speech. In I Have a Dream speech, he also talked about economics. They all seem to skip over that part, and they like to go to this dream, this idea of dreaming. And so Martin Luther King also mentioned the fact that he abandoned this idea of the dream. He said the dream had become a nightmare. I'm trying to get to it now. I should have that queued up, but I don't, so just bear with me. He said himself, the dream had become a nightmare, and that basically he had to, basically saying he had to abandon this idea of the dream. And they were basically trying to go in another direction. So just bear with me while I cue this up. I almost got it now. So let me see. All right, so here we go. It's the great Dr. Martin Luther King saying that this idea of the dream, he's basically got to abandon that idea because the dream has become a nightmare. These are his words. So let's see if I can cue this up right. This is our tribute to the great Dr. Martin Luther King on the day that we acknowledge the birth, federal holiday for the great Dr. Martin Luther King. Just want to put the great Dr. King in context because the Dr. King we get is exceptionally out of context. So here we go. This is him talking about how the dream has become a nightmare.
In a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood on the Lincoln Memorial that day in August '63, and you said, I had a dream, did that dream envision that you could see a war in Asia preventing the federal government doing for the Negroes, preventing the society doing for the Negroes that which you think had to be done?
No, I didn't envision that then. I must confess that that period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others all across the nation, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And in 1954, which was, 64, 1963, 9 years after the Supreme Court's decision to be in the March on Washington, meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
The dream has turned into a nightmare. They still limit him to saying, I had a dream. He himself said the dream had turned into a nightmare.
Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it...
Some of the old optimism was a little superficial. This idea of I have a dream is what he's referring to as the old optimism. And he, out of his mouth, said that it was superficial.
Must be tempered with a solid realism. And
it must be tempered with a solid realism. What's the realism? The realism is that we have to stop dreaming and we have to start doing for self.
I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation.
All right, so you hear him say himself, out of his mouth, that the dream has become a nightmare, and it was superficial optimism. Now, on another note, the great Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't just marching and giving great speeches. He was also beginning to talk about economics, because that's one thing that the civil rights movement missed. Civil rights movement, the goal was to integrate into white society, thinking that integration equaled better treatment, and it didn't. And the goal was also to get the right to vote. So political power. So we went for integration and political power before we went for economic power. That was a mistake. That was a huge mistake. We got the right to vote, but we didn't pursue economic power. Now, every other group of people, no matter what the race is, when they come to America, they come here to get an economic footing. They don't necessarily come to vote. And I know this for sure because I've spoken to some of them. And one years ago told me, I didn't come to America to vote, own the business. He said, I came here to get money. So the mistake the civil rights movement made was to put integration and political power ahead of economic power. The first goal, the first objective should have been economic power. If you study the great Honorable Marcus Garvey, he talked a lot about economic power. He didn't just talk about economic power. He actually went about the task of creating businesses, Negro Factories Corporation, producing clothes, producing toys for children, producing what we would need. Not only did he create factories that produce products that we need because we use those products every day, he also created jobs for Black people. Again, job, that's economic, right? So W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a person who publicly had issues with the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey, helped to start the NAACP. And the leadership at the top was not Black. The NAACP, contrary to what many people may think or know, was not necessarily started by Black people only. And so the great W.E.B. Du Bois now begins to have a problem at some point that the leadership at the top wasn't Black. He said, look, the leadership is not Black. If you don't change that and make the leadership Black, then I'm going to step out and come away from the organization. And eventually he did, because they didn't acquiesce to what he wanted. But on his way out, he wrote an article where he talked about the NAACP and what their goals really were. He said the NAACP was promoting among Black people non-economic liberalism, meaning NAACP was telling us not to do what was in our economic best interest. It was telling us basically to just go and vote for whomever the liberal candidate for public office was. We see that same thing today. The Democrats, as well as the Republicans, I'm not letting anybody off the hook, they all promote non-economic, well, Republicans don't promote liberalism, but they don't promote economics among Black people. Non-economic liberalism is defined as the idea of not instructing Black people to do what is in their economic best interests, but instead instructing them to vote for liberal candidates for public office. So this idea of economics was skipped over by the civil rights movement. And so W.E.B. Du Bois says, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture. We have to focus on economics. When the civil rights movement began in 1955, they did not necessarily, go for economic independence or creating what Brother Shamari out of Philly calls Black life. Life is L-I-F-E, liberation, independence, freedom, and empowerment. We didn't go for that. We instead try to go for integration. I think this is from the final speech of Dr. Martin Luther King. This was the day before he was assassinated. In this speech, and I think this is another one important, focused on economics. In this speech, he's saying to Black people, in an effort to get justice, whether it's fair treatment, equity, so forth and so on, we need to boycott white-owned businesses. And so that's another part or aspect of Martin Luther King that no one ever talks about. They still limit the man to saying, I have a dream. In this speech, he's telling us to boycott white-owned businesses. Again, your demonstration, your marching, Martin Luther King said, had to be anchored to economic withdrawal.
Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you.
Withdrawing economic support from you, meaning we're going to boycott white-owned businesses.
So as a result of this, we're asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy Seal Test milk. Tell them not to buy what is all the bread, Wonder Bread. And what is other bread come to Jesse? Tell them not to buy Hart's bread. As Jesse Jackson has said, up to now, only the garbage men have been feeling pain. Now we must kind of redistribute the pain.
There you go. So now we must redistribute the pain, meaning we're not getting justice. We're not getting fair and equal treatment in American society. We need to begin to boycott white-owned businesses. This is no I have a dream speech. This is a man focused on economics and economic withdrawal. Those are his words. Now, the great Martin Luther King also talked about reparations. Again, we go into the economics again. I have a dream speech does mention economics. However, the system and those people that are controlling the narrative now don't focus on what the great Dr. Martin Luther King said about economics. They definitely won't play the speech for you. He's telling you to boycott white-owned businesses, Coca-Cola, and so forth. And they won't play this next piece that I'm about to play now. The point is, in a capitalist society, only thing they understand is economics. So we want better treatment. And I say we should, our goal should be to eliminate the system altogether, because the great Malcolm X once told us that the 1/10 is our enemy. He said, many of us don't think so, but time will tell. And I think history tells us that the 1/10 is our enemy. The great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing once said in her book, ISIS Papers, and Malcolm X said that, by the way, in a speech called Message to the Grassroots. I like to give references. She said, Malcolm X said, the 1/10 is our enemy. Many of us don't think so, but time will tell. Now, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, in her book called The ISIS Papers, again, giving a reference, said that racism is war on Black people. Now, if we don't understand our situation in the system, which is based on the myth of white supremacy within the context of warfare, we will never transform the condition of our group. One aspect of warfare is boycott. On the political world stage, it's called economic sanctions. But that is a strategy of war. Now, the great Neely Fuller Jr. in his book, The Code, said for Black people who are the number one victims of this system, which is based on the myth of white supremacy, the system of structural racism, he says our goal should be to eliminate that system and replace it with a system of justice. Circling back now to the great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she said, if you're not doing your part to fight the system of structural racism, which is based on the myth of white supremacy, then you're basically just trying to find a more comfortable seat in it. And so we have to, if we're going to create an independent reality for ourselves, we have to be focused on economics. This is the great Dr. Martin Luther King talking about reparations. All right, so that was my fault. I didn't share my screen. Just stay with me. Let's see, we got some guests backstage. We're going to come to them next. There we go.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the Black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Now that is the revolutionary Dr. Martin Luther King saying that we are coming to get our check. That's a very radically different message from I have a dream. So I think I made my point about the revolutionary Dr. Martin Luther King. We have two guests. We have with us Kwabena Rasuli from Clear the Airways Project, as well as Dr. James McIntosh of Simotap. Can you brothers hear me?
Yes, I hear you well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, yes.
Hear you loud and strong.
Okay, yeah, so I'm having a technical issue on my end. I'm not being seen, but the audio is going across, so we're going to forge ahead anyway. The campaign against Netflix was started a little less than a year ago now. and it has been ongoing. And the call was to cancel your Netflix because of the animated reboot of Good Times. Many of us were offended by that, myself included. What can you tell us about the origin of this campaign to boycott Netflix? Brother Quab, I will start with you.
Well, it started when we first saw the trailer last March, pretty much, and it started with everybody. I mean, just people who saw the trailer were appalled and outraged. 2024 marked the 50th anniversary of when the legendary original sitcom Good Times started in 1974, featuring, of course, JJ, Thelma, Michael, James, the father, James Evans, and Sister Florida, Walona, and Janet Jackson, all that. Just a sitcom based in Chicago, based in Cabrini Green, high rises housing project, and had some good lessons in the show. JJ was kind of buffoonery in the beginning of it, but a little later on he got a little bit more serious. It was still a comedy, but still had some good lessons in the show. And so always shown on syndication, people see it, watch it, and then they decided we're gonna reboot it. And some of us thought that it was going to be something related to the show in terms of having some substance to it, but it turned out to be an animated beyond minstrel show, and that's how it was even depicted in the trailer, and the people didn't want it. So that's when we got a hold of it. There were some brothers and sisters, Project Islamic Hope in Los Angeles, held a demonstration before the show even aired on Netflix, and then even after, not just us, but so many other people said, don't even air this, don't start it. On April 12th, 2024, Netflix debuted it, and it was just disgusting. And it's ironic too that we meet here and we talk here on King Day, the day we celebrate Dr. King's birth all around the country on this holiday, because that was one of the things we talked about initially. What you just talked about, and his economic sanctions, and Dr. McIntosh, who's with us now, I'll let him go from there. I mean, right now, because that's one of the main things we had to do, like what Dr. King said we should do on April 3rd, at that speech on April 3rd, 1967, a year and a day before he was assassinated.
Dr. McIntosh, you want to add to that?
Yes, I just think that it was actually the day before he was assassinated.
It was.
Yeah, the day before he was assassinated. So Brother Quabana made me aware of it. And I made, the executive committee of CMOTAP aware of it. And Quabana and myself and our brothers and sisters on the West Coast decided we would try to impose economic sanctions, because in that last speech before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he said that anything we do, like we might have protest marches, we might do those sorts of things, but he described a procedure for imposing economic sanctions on anyone that we were protesting against if they would not, concede to the various demands and things that were made to them. And he specifically, and this was before the Memphis, the garbage workers strike in Memphis, he named specific corporations as an example. He talked about the people in Memphis, boycotting Coca-Cola. I think he said maybe Seal Test, Wonder Bread, specific large corporations he named. I don't know if that was the reason, but the following day, we know that he was assassinated. So we tried to look to see, did they advertise on Netflix? In other words, did they have some sponsors we could target? We looked at their investors, and their investors, as we saw it, and we're not financial experts, but we looked at it, appeared that it was quite well spread out. And so that the easiest thing would be to go directly at Netflix itself. Their money came from the subscriptions that people took out. And so we put a list of demands, and among them was to cancel your Netflix. And then the other things that we asked people to do was to go to their organizations and to get their organizations to cancel the Netflix, and to go to their sororities and their fraternities and their churches and that sort of thing. We people began to do that, and we just selected one of the. There were already multiple petitions online against this series, so we came in, relatively late. We came in April, and thing was scheduled to start April the 12th, and they actually started. They just ignored all of the criticism, and then the other thing was that we, had one mass meeting online from around the country to alert people, and that's how that's basically how we proceeded. The economic sanctions consisted of canceling your Netflix, and as we told people, we knew this was a great sacrifice for them, but that Harriet Tubman wouldn't feel sorry for them, Nat Turner wouldn't feel sorry. When we talk about sacrifice, Fannie Lou Hamer wouldn't feel sorry for them. So that's basically how the economic sanctions part and the struggle against it started. I would say also one other thing, that although Brother Quabana, and Brother Quabana is aware of this, there were some positive aspects of the original Good Times. Understand that there were a large number of people that opposed the original Good Times. And Tony Browder, in fact, told a story of how he was in Asia, and I believe it was a Chinese person. I don't have the exact name of it. Tony Browder has a film with it. In fact, the film wasn't Tony Browder. Tony Browder showed a film from the brother who wrote the book The Choice, and that brother was in Asia. Pardon me, that brother was in Asia, and the Asian man asked him. He said he thought that it was like Birth of a Nation. He said, I don't know. Those shows are Good Times, and he said those are white actors playing black people, aren't they? And the brother who wrote The Choice to him said no, those are black actors. And he said the guy's face dropped, and he told him, he said that people that would, do that sort of thing, that would play those kinds of roles, were never going to achieve their freedom. So, but in comparison, but as Quabana said, the original Good Times, in comparison to this thing, the Good Times reboot is like the Hosea. It looks like the Hosea, looks like the sacred writings of the ancient Africans, if you were to make a comparison. This one is so much worse. And the trailer, which was awful, once we because since we didn't have Netflix, we didn't see it, but people began posting things online, and we came to find that it was worse than the trailer. I think last time I was here, I might have critiqued the trailer. I had a little video to critique the trailer.
That's correct.
But once we saw the actual video, there are things that are much worse. I know that we don't have enough time to go through all of it, but I probably, if I had the chance to show you, I could show you just about 3 or 4 images that, if you don't understand understand these images and how dangerous and negative they are, then you really won't understand anything. So, but if we get a chance and you let me show those, I'll show those few images.
Yeah, I'm having a technical issue on my end, so the audio is coming through, but the image probably won't. So this is a nationwide campaign, and Dr. McIntosh, you mentioned sororities and people's, fraternities and professional organizations. You also mentioned the church. Sister Betty Dobson, who was co-chair of CMOTAP, had made a appeal to the churches to get on board with the boycott against Netflix. What has been the response from the Black church?
Crickets.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
nothing.
no
Nothing. I mean, we had at our first meeting, a brother who identified himself as a deacon at one of the. He was certain he was going to go back and get his church to get involved. When we contacted it, I mean, they made no contact, no response, nothing when we responded to them. So we got more response from organizations, from political organizations, which you might not expect to be bothered with something that some might consider so trivial. But media, if people understand, is not trivial at all.
That's right.
Like basically, this type of media precedes the genocides. Before they start killing people, they project these sorts of images and vilify the person, vilify the people, character assassinate the people, do that sort of thing. You can find it everywhere you've had genocidal movements. And the one I use all the time, the example I use all the time is the example of Birth of a Nation, the movie that was based on the book The Klansman. Klansman came out in 1909, Birth of a Nation came out in 1915. And the Ku Klux Klan, which had been dying off since post-Reconstruction period, had a resurgence. As a result of that movie, which glorified the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan had a resurgence, and by 1919, you had what's called the Red Summer, when the most black people lynched ever in the history of this country occurred. And it can be attributed directly to that media. And, you know, there's similar examples in other countries, Germany and others, and in this country, when we talk about the indigenous people, sort of little novels they were making about, you know, quote, taming the West and that sort of stuff.
Okay, so I know Steph Curry, NBA star Steph Curry, the three-point machine. He is one of the executive producers on the project. And I know your focus has been and is going to continue to be Steph Curry. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Steph Curry is one of our focuses. We've written 3 open letters. One was to Netflix, the Netflix CEO, and then who later became the co-CEO, a guy by the name of Sarandos, white man married to a black woman. And then the second one we wrote was to the churches, as you said before. And then the third one we wrote was to the commissioner of the NBA, which is a guy by the name of Silver. And, you know, what we pointed out to the NBA, since you're mentioning Steph Curry, the reason we sent something to the commissioner is because Steph Curry was asked about his role. He's an executive producer of this trash, and he did not say that he had been deceived. He did not apologize. He did not offer anything that would make us let him off the hook, because we were all eager to let him off the hook because he's such a great basketball player and has entertained us so much. People love him. But the fact is that he said that it was an adult cartoon and that he wouldn't let his children look at it. You know, the question that Robin asked was, what about our children, Steph? So we've asked the commissioner, why is it that you were so hostile and so intense against Kyrie Irving when he tweeted something that you considered anti-Semitic, and that is crickets when it comes to Steph Curry? Why has you pressured Kyrie Irving to apologize, but you haven't pressured Curry to apologize? And of course, understand an apology is usually your first step before asking for reparations, asking for repairing the damage that you've done, the damage that you've done. And so, those are 3 targets that we have, selected so far in terms of our open letters. And in terms of places, we've demonstrated at the Netflix office, and we have scheduled stuff, and we've demonstrated at Barclays Arena, with propaganda about Silver. But we will be visiting Silver's office at some point. We will be filing some legal papers because so far they haven't even answered our written responses. In fact, Netflix has not answered hand-delivered response. We hand-delivered a letter to Sarandos at the Netflix headquarters in New York, and we have received no response at all. And lots of people, we don't even know how many people have written. Lots of people have written, and no one has gotten a response that I've heard of.
Wow. And there was even a call to make a phone call, because I called and I spoke to a human, and they took down my remarks, but I never heard anything back from them.
Yes, and most of us, that's a good point. I actually kind of forgot that. I certainly was interviewed by someone also, but it was a very generic type of thing. It was nobody close to the top. It was just one step away from AI. Just a person they hired to be a flat catcher for the corporation, And I doubt if that stuff goes further than file 13.
And we can say me 3 too, because we also called and talked to someone. And when you mentioned the letter, we delivered the letter also in Los Angeles on that same day, June 5th. We had demonstrations at their offices in New York and Los Angeles on that day. And again, how appropriate it is today. I remember when we were demonstrating against the McDonald's, which was one of the largest sponsors of Black media in the country. And it was on Dr. King Day in Chicago. And one of the brothers who was with us, he shared that Dr. King wasn't just about celebration, it was also about demonstration against these sort of injustices. And that's why we were there. And we had the most people ever for a demonstration that was on King Day. So it's so important that we did with this on the day of that we celebrate our brother. And brother, before we move on too, I mean, I know you mentioned it earlier, you talked about it earlier, and both of you brothers staunch Garveyites. And again, it's cool that pardon happened. But I know you dealt with that earlier in the show, and we've been sharing that song too from you all, the Marcus McFly Garvey song today, and all this is connected.
Absolutely. So, Brother Kwabena, you're pretty much bi-coastal, and you're on the ground with your ear to the street. You mentioned that there were demonstrations in New York and in California, and probably some in the Midwest. But there were some actions recently that involved People Organization for Progress, POP, Larry Ham's organization. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, I attended that demonstration. I also presented at POP on Thursday night. And I showed them a group of slides and some things. And what they did was they voted to support our actions that we're taking. And then on Saturday, we attended their demonstration. They had a march. They had a Martin Luther King March of Resistance, and over 1,000 people were there. And we marched through the streets of Newark and then reassembled at one of the local colleges there. I really can't remember it, but it's one of those that's downtown, something like Essex County College or maybe one of those. And we assembled there. We didn't stay for the entire program. There were people from all over the state. There were people from Atlantic City. There were people from New York City. We were from New York City. And so in the future, we've asked them, will they come with us when because we're planning to give Steph Curry the reception he deserves when he comes to New York in March. And Brother Kwabena is the one who's researched those dates for us. So I'll let him handle that part.
Okay, so obviously, we need to mobilize more people around this. And this is a question for both of you. And Dr. McIntosh, we'll start with you. How do we mobilize more people around this issue? Like, how do we spread the word? You said the church dropped the ball. What would be the next step?
No, we have to go back to these things. It's just that there's a kind of I would say, like a protocol that you have to use with people that have a great deal of self-importance. They're not going to respond to mass appeals. You've got to call them, make an appointment with them, cajole them a little bit, and they will, unless you're in that circle, unless you're in that circle that they consider to be important, they're not going to respond to you. So, we have people that are members of churches and things, and we will try to make direct appeals to some. We can't drop them because there's so many of our people involved in that. With the fraternities, and actually a lady from the NACP was at the POP meeting, and she all but apologized to me for the conservative nature of her organization. She didn't. I won't expose who she is or anything, but she's a president of a local chapter, and she told me, that I was speaking the truth because someone asked a question about getting the NACP. But of course, these organizations that say they're supposed to be civil rights organizations, nobody should have to beg them to get involved with a project like this. But we essentially, that's almost what we're going to have to do. In order to mobilize more people, we go directly to the people, and we also go to groups and organized formations to get them to play a role in this struggle. Because CMOTAP can't do anything by itself. I don't think that Clear the Airwaves can do. We have to have our people with us, and so if these people have the people, we got to go there to them, and that's how we intend to mobilize them.
Okay, now
one of the things we did was we formed a Black Solidarity Day committee in November, We've come together before, but we had various organizations, and all of those organizations have signed on. In fact, at the first demonstration we had representation from the National Association of Kawaii organizations, from the December 12th movement, from the Co-op City, the African American Association, from CMOTAP, from from, like I said, a large number of organizations. But we have to include Larry Hamm. The way he got those 1,000 people out, he had 300 organizations signed on.
Wow.
And that's what we're going to have to do for our demonstration of Barclays. We've got to get as many organizations to give us at least verbal and token support. And if we get 300 organizations to send 3 people, well, you just about got your 1,000 people.
Yeah, no, we got snow overnight in New York City. I know there's an action plan for today. Is that going to continue forward?
Yes, as soon as I finish here, that's where I'm going. We have December 12th has a march against racism, poverty, and fascism. And, it's hard to get people to demonstrate against something they don't think has already occurred, or they don't think is coming. But it's coming. And the blessing we have that other people have not had is these fascists are telling you beforehand what they're going to do. They're showing you by the people they select in the cabinet, all of these people in the women's movement and everything. If you don't have any problem with this number of sexual abusers being in, as potential cabinet members, and a president who's been convicted of whatever he did to that lady in the in a department store, and I mean, which is way crazy, and somebody called it rape, and he's suing them for defamation. So I won't say what it is. What the lady described to me sounded like rape, but I don't know what the court said. And then to have a whole bunch of people like that in the cabinet, including one accused of being involved with underage minors and doing stuff actually while he was in the Congress. That person might have withdrawn their name, but it shows you the direction which he's going on that. I just took that women's thing just as an example. With respect to race, I mean, even say free journalism or black journalism, he has a proposed member of the cabinet that's saying they're going to go after the people that that held Trump accountable for for what he did on in January of the end of his last term. So it's coming, and it's been here all along. I mean, when you have the police you have the vigilantes can choke a man to death on the subway, walk away scot-free, not even accused of negligent homicide or assault or anything. Just, I mean, not even convicted of anything. That you kill that black member, that's okay. Anytime you can have video of these corrections officers killing Robert, I believe his name is Robert Brooks, the brother Robert Brooks in prison here in New York. Fascism is here, and if it's not here, it's knocking at the door. We also have situations where just basically people forget so much violence is taking place against us. I bet you can't find in your audience, if you had that kind of chat thing where we could talk at the same time, nobody remembers the name of those officers that killed that brother down in Baltimore, beating on video. Remember, it was on video. They beat him down, and he tried to run home, and they had pepper sprayed him, beat him, so on and so forth. White supremacy causes destruction and damage at every level of the mental status, including the memory. And amnesia is one of the problems that we have. So anyway, I'm veering off a little bit, but fascism is impending. So that's why I'm going to be out there. I don't feel like going out in the snow. I feel like clearing the snow this morning in front of my house, but I have to go out there. Your choices are to do nothing, or try to impose economic sanctions and protests, unless you're one of those bold ones that, picks up the gun. And so I'm going to be out of the demonstration. And many people are doing other things. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Dr. McIntosh, I got to bring you back on one day to talk about your book on Donald Trump, because we have yet to really lay out and talk about that. So I definitely want to bring you back to talk about that. Now, Brother Kwabena, in terms of acts of resistance, do you have more tactics planned going forward to not only raise awareness about Netflix, but to get people out?
I mean, sharing platforms like this. I mean, one of the brothers who called yesterday mentioned some progressive radio shows nationwide and in our local areas that we should also be utilizing. I know Brother Carl Nelson even shared about our demonstration, about our program on yesterday, but we need to get on his show also to talk about that on his show too. And those things, and also the direct action. We just mentioned how the sister asked me one time we were doing a presentation on the Clear Airways project. She said, "Kwabena, you're not gonna be able to change this." And I was like, "You're absolutely correct." Kind of paraphrasing Kwame Ture. I will not be able to do it. If I would have been able to do it, it would have been done. But it's going to have to be we. It's going to have to be a bunch of organizations doing this. So, and when we talk about, you getting out there today, Dr. McIntosh, I mean, shoot, January 20th in Chicago, when we were out there at that McDonald's, I mean, we got some footage of it. We were freezing. And we're going to be freezing most likely on the 8th of February in Chicago, in front of United Center, when we demonstrate and have that demonstration in front of the Chicago Bulls hosting the Golden State Warriors. That night. It's going to be cold. And LA on the 6th, most likely won't be that cold, but our brothers and sisters are going to be out there. And then, like you said, in March, hopefully it'll be a little warmer in March, but the people are going to be out in New York on March the 4th at Madison Square Garden, March the 6th, Brooklyn, New York. So I think that's going to be a key piece when we hit and expose the hypocrisy of the NBA and challenge Stephen Curry on this madness, because they have the nerve to be putting out a season 2. They have announced, Netflix has announced that they're going to do a second season of this stuff. 8,000, it was 8,000 something people who gave just the trailer a thumbs up last time we checked, but 80,000 plus who gave it a thumbs down. So the people obviously don't want this, and they obviously don't care, but we care. We care about our people, and we're not having this, bro. We're not having this stuff. And just, I know we didn't really talk about some of the content of this piece, but one of the worst. Well, they got a 2-year-old baby drug deal, and Dr. McIntosh, you guys shared on the flyer for the last one. A grown man aiming his gun at a 2-year-old baby about to shoot. The trailer has baby rappers shooting at the baby drug deal. Mm-hmm. The mother is arming the child in this animated minstrel show with his Glock before he leaves her house that he's been kicked out of before the daddy gets home. She arms him with the Glock. They have a 12-year-old girl depicted, 12 years old, on stage with grown women twerking. They have her having her first cycle, have her laying in a bed with blood coming out between her legs. My little niece was with me yesterday while we were doing the program, and she happened to be listening. We were sharing some of the things that the child was doing. She said, she's 11 years old, and she knows that this is wrong. She said it's sick, it's disgusting, it's a shame. And she's 11 years old. My mother, who's 80-something years old, said, when I told her about this, she said, they can't do that. Now, surely if they know, Stephen Curry knows, Without Shepherd knows. So no, this is beyond disgusting, beyond minstrel, and it has to be stopped.
Dr. McIntosh, I know you have to go because you got to go and get to that demonstration. But
I don't have to get there until if I can stay until 11:30.
It's okay.
Yeah, but I wanted to illustrate what Kwabena was saying. Rather than go to the disgusting picture of the blood between her legs as she's there, which was bad enough. Why not go to let's just go to the granddaddy of them all. Let's go to this scene right here. Are y'all seeing my screen?
Yes.
That's a black girl. Look, this is menstrual blood. Her mother told her that if she wore a tampon, she'd become a whore. So the mother gave her a diaper. Blood is leaking over everywhere where she goes to school. She writes on the blackboard with the blood. She has blood you can see on her mouth. She has blood on her hands, and she flings the blood. Does she fling it at the person who earlier had said, your neighborhood is a real S-hole? No, she flings it at a black boy, and they actually go so far as to show it smeared on his face. Now, if you don't understand that they would not do this to a little boy wearing a yarmulke or anything along those lines, if you don't understand that they would go crazy if a black person made a video like that, but it's okay to do that to black people. They also style a black man as an ape. I have a picture, I think, where I can show you the shadow. I'll try to show it to you. Yes. So I just want you to see this, because this is one of the frames. The scene is so fast that you might not be able to see it. But there's a frame where they have the black man having sex with his wife in front of a dog, and they cast a shadow. Every frame of an animated film is reviewed and is selected. So there's no accidents. This is not an accident. Does that look like the face of a man or an ape?
Oh, that looks like an ape.
That looks like an ape.
And that's in the trailer. That's in the trailer.
Right. And that's in the trailer. But the full scene, when we saw the whole scene, and then Quaban provided me with the context. The context is that the man has a dog, a PTSD dog, and the dog, the wife becomes jealous of the dog. Imagine that. Wife becomes jealous of the dog, and so she has sex in front of the dog with her husband. And this is a scene that I'm going to actually show you right now, if I can. I may have to do the slideshow thing. Let's see. Okay, maybe that'll make it easy. Okay. What does it say? Sharing the window. StreamYard is sharing window. Stop sharing. No, I don't want it to stop sharing. Maybe I can put hide for that. Okay. Now let's see if the slide is not active. Same thing happened yesterday. I'm not able to make this. Let's just give it a little time. Sometimes it has to warm up, or maybe this is one. Oh yeah, that's the wrong slide actually. Now that I look at it, I see what the problem is.
And as Dr. McIntosh gets to that slide, and I hope it's the one that shows the language, because it is. I don't know if it's that one or not, but a clip. But it is in French, so they're showing this around the world. This depiction of black animated family. They're showing this stuff around the world, disrespecting our people, disrespecting us. Via Netflix, yes. Steph Curry and Steph Curry. Oh, there it is. Okay.
We'll show it twice because it's very fast, but it is what we said it is.
You can't hear the audio though. Can you describe it, because we can't hear the audio?
Yes, I probably should have put.
Look, I don't know if you want to describe this. But...
Okay, come. Now the children are traumatized and the dog is traumatized.
This is disgusting.
I can stop that. It's in French. I don't know how to share the sound.
That's fine. Yeah, that makes the point.
Yeah, so those, if you can, I mean, there's many things. They try to kill you on every possible level. This is a meal she's serving a husband, and it's a thing called takis. These very seasoned, pieces of dough or whatever it is cooked, and then she's got a corn wrapped in chitlins. This is the meal that she's serving. So many different ways they try to kill us, and another gut-wrenching scene is the ride through the uterus on a gigantic tampon by the so-called queen of the uterus, and they go to different regions, and then you see all of these little things here, and they say that these are, I think that they might identify them as something. One reviewer has called them cotton sperm balls. They're certainly not ovaries. They're not ovums. They're not ova. Pardon me. They're not ova because a female, the ova in the actual egg of the woman, you know what I'm saying? And actually, bilateral salpingo, oophorectomy, they're in the ovaries of the woman. And the cell she has, by puberty, she has 10,000 cells over, and she doesn't get any more. Men produce billions of sperm, and they produce and so on and so forth. But to be free out in the opening like that, you wouldn't have that with ova. So that's got to be, as the reviewer said, white cotton sperm balls. And this is just basically just nasty stuff. That's all I can say.
Yeah, to say the least. That's deplorable the way they depict us. And
Yes.
Dr. McIntosh, you talked about how it was psychotic for Jewish people to not respond to this as if it's that thing. Can you explain that?
Yes, I can. And it's psychotic for Christian people and Muslim people not to respond to it, because this is for, see, I'm not judging them on the Medu Netra. I'm not judging them on my value system. I'm judging them on their value system. In their Torah, it says that if a woman has a period, she's unclean for 7 days, and whoever touches her will be unclean. Now, if that's what it says in the Christian Bible book Leviticus and in the Torah Leviticus, why is there no outrage from the church?
Right.
That is something you should throw into a black boy's face. Now, here's something from an article about McFarlane. It says, McFarlane attributes the crude ethnic humor in his shows to his predominantly Jewish writing staff.
Wow.
So now, I didn't say it. That's from an article. And if that is the case, they know that this is offensive. So it's not an accident. They're deliberately offending you. McFarlane is an atheist. He has probably the best excuse.
Yeah.
But what is Steph Curry? Steph Curry's family is supposed to be devout Christians. They went to church several times a week, all that type of thing. This is the scene that he told you about to demonstrate the girl's first menstrual period. So, like I said before, won't go through a whole bunch of the things. There's so many things wrong with the video, so many things wrong. I don't know if I mentioned it. This is the teacher. They show the teacher with a flask in her mouth, with cigarettes in her pockets, and she makes sexual, lewd comments to the mother, asking him, because this actually says not fans only, this is only fans. Maybe it's fans only, I'm not sure.
It's only fans. Yeah.
But it's a porn site, and she asked the boy, "Do you do only fans or fans only? Take off your shoes and let me see what kind of feet you're working with." And of course, this is an allusion to the size of your feet being connected to the size of your penis. And so this is the teacher saying this to a student, and his mother is right there, and the mother doesn't lay her flat out. This is insulting on a number of different levels. They make fun of a person that has standing in multiple religions. They make fun of white Jesus and black Jesus. So Jesus is a prophet in Islam. He is a savior or Christ in the Christian religion. Why no outrage over this? Why no outrage over this? And here you'll see that they represent God, who now you're getting all of the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions. They picture God with a lavender fingernail and a turquoise fingernail, while Jesus is sitting on the cloud with a strange-looking angel, and he's answering prayers by cell phone, and he answers the prayers, "Who this? Who that say who that when I say who that?" That's not his answers. That's from the old Mantan Morley movie. So I think I made my point with the slides. I don't have to. Oh, I forgot. They actually offend people who believe in ancestry. Well, they offend us multiple times with people that believe in ancestral veneration and people who believe in ancient Kemetic gods. The piece on the right is mine, but the piece on the left, this is them running a total non sequitur in the video, at least in the trailer, of them running. And there's the god Anubis, also called Yenapu. So they just basically, this atheist attacks every religion, every way that Black people in general connect with the divine. You know, even if it's the divinity within, they've offended every way that we connect with the divine, and that's because it tells you more about the producer than it does of the consumer. The scene with the dog is clearly related to Seth MacFarlane's own things. The article on him that was in New Yorker magazine, it says that his mother once masturbated a dog. Now, if a man would say that about his mother and tell you that about his mother, and that it was a great source of humor around the office. So this scene with the wife being jealous of the dog, it's clear his stuff is right on the surface. The scenes where he makes us ugly, where he says we're ugly. The article also talks about how he goes in at work in the middle of the day, goes in the bathroom and has some kind of little device to spray tan on. So clearly he's a person that doesn't feel good about how he looks. He projects those feelings onto African people, calling them ugly throughout. I mean, literally from the very first scene of the thing, the violence and all of that. All of these are his hang-ups. So,
Dr. McIntosh.
Yes.
You know, when I first even heard about Seth MacFarlane, again, I tell that story watching the football game on Fox late one evening, second game, and fell asleep like we often do. The game was over. Who won the game? I don't even know. But what I did wake up to was that there it is right there. That's what I woke up to on a cartoon with Harriet Tubman. You don't mess with Harriet Tubman. And got this naked white woman draped on Harriet Tubman. I was like, who did this?
And the audio says, the visual is one thing, but the audio says Harriet Tubman doing Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, I don't really want to get grimy, but notice that Gwyneth Paltrow is nude. And that expression doing has a particular meaning in the incarcerated community. They have a word called the do be. Okay, the B is the second word. You can figure out what that means. And so that has a different meaning, especially when you compare who is Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow is this woman who made a candle called Smells Like My Vagina. And she was actually criticized for another ad she was in, had nothing to do with this, but it says reaches new depths. And the critics said that this was a vagina, that she's in the middle of a giant vagina. That's what that looks like to them.
So Marcus Garvey would be disgusted at this, as he would be disgusted. Dr. King, again, we're recognizing this day to day. He would be outraged. This is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X this year. He would be outraged. Malcolm X had 5 daughters. And this is what they're putting on the screen for us. Come on, people. We need y'all out here with us. We need, we had thousands, tens of thousands who gave it a thumbs down. We need more than that. We need some direct action against these beasts, because that's what they are, beasts.
So the main call is to cancel your Netflix. And I got to go ahead and get off of here. Dr. McIntosh, I know you have to go too. But for people that might want to join you in today's action, where is that going to be?
Okay, it's going to be, it's a march down, I think what they call Harriet Tubman Boulevard. It's at Fulton Street is what most people know it. And it starts at G2UC, I think, Plaza, which is Grand Street and Fulton, the corner of Grand and Fulton. And we're going to be marching from there.
All right, Brooklyn, let's go. Where you at? Brother Quabanai, you wanna add anything on to that? But before we leave, you want to give any final closing words?
February 6th in Los Angeles, Steph Curry's coming there to play basketball. We got a meeting there. February 8th in Frigid, Chicago, we got a meeting there. March the 4th, March the 6th in New York City, we got to meet him there. We got to show the NBA Steph Curry and these people we're not playing with them.
Okay. And so in the run-up, as we scale up to those dates, I'll bring you both back on so we can continue to plug both of those.
Thank you so much, Brother Rob. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this information to our people. And if we have more people who do these podcasts and social media and stuff, that's the way we'll get the word out, because certainly the mass market media is not going to publicize the fact that one of these gigantic corporations is doing this stuff to us and that they need to be punished.
Absolutely. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you both for being here. And I will reach out to you again soon so that we can continue to raise awareness about the boycott against Netflix. But at the least, cancel your Netflix, right?
Absolutely, at the very least.
At the least, cancel your Netflix.
Yes.
All right, brothers, I want to thank you both for being here, and I will reach out to you again. We'll be bringing you back on soon.
Thank you so much. Peace
All
and
right.
blessings.
Peace.